Hey guys, how's it going? It's the Synth Doctor here, and today, continuing the series of Jx3p videos, we're going to take a look at the PG200, and we're actually going to take it apart and clean it up and see what makes it tick. Also in this video, I will be showing you how to clean the Roland momentary tactile switches. You cannot get replacements as far as I know. So the Synth Doctor has his own unique approach to rejuvenating these switches and bringing them back to life. These are the same switches also found on the Jx3p panel board, which we know when they get old they can act up, kind of double trigger and not always work. This programmer seems to be working fine, but I would just like to completely take it apart and clean it since I fully restored my personal Jx3p. I would like this to be at the same level of detail. Also, it is held together by these magnetic strips underneath, and one of these is actually missing. So I believe what I'm going to do is remove this other magnetic strip here. It's actually very difficult to get good quality vinyl self-adhesive magnetic sheet, if you will. Nowadays, from my understanding, the tooling and machinery to produce these are very expensive, and although they do sell these which are much thinner now, the magnetic strength is not nearly as strong as what they used to be. And I took a look at McMaster Carr, and they have a neodymium based one, but I think it ended up being $60 to get 1 foot of this material, which normally I'm a proponent for spending more to get something nice, but that to me is just ridiculously expensive. So I think what I'm going to be doing is epoxying some neodymium magnets, maybe 6 of them, just so it doesn't move around, to the bottom of the programmer here, and then I'll be applying some self-adhesive felt, that way that they don't scratch the front panel of the synth, and I can keep it in great condition. So let's get into it. Let's take it apart. I do have the cable for it as well, and yeah, we'll get into it. I've never actually been inside of one of these before, but it looks like we have 6 screws here, so we'll start by removing these. Alright, so now that those 6 screws are out, we'll go ahead and wiggle the lid off here. So we can see there's the rubber sides. And I'll place this over to the other end of my workbench. So now, looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, another 6 screws. And before I go ahead and remove these to lift the board out, I'm going to flip her back over here. And I'm going to go ahead and remove all of these knobs. So just for reference, snap a quick photo here of the PG200. Good. Okay. So normally they come off pretty easy. These are not actually detented. So these have like a star pattern on the inside here. Sorry, it's difficult to see. There we go. So it's like a star pattern. So basically you could put the knob on however you want. You can see that that's in the wrong orientation now. So generally what I like to do are rotate these switches, at least these, somewhere where you remember the switch is actually lined up. So I'll just go to the leftmost position on these and get everything down here. These knobs you can always just line up again at 0, so doesn't really matter. All of them to the left. Okay, so we just pull these out. Sometimes they can be stubborn, so a lot of people will just grab on it and pull. Okay, that can put a lot of stress on the shaft. A lot of times what I like to do is I'll try to pinch really close to the surface and I get a little more leverage there. So basically I put my finger bent in like this, and I rest my thumb down there and kind of use it like a pry bar and very gently apply force. And usually you can get these off. Sometimes they're loose, like this one just came off really easily. And what you can do a lot of times is take a flathead screwdriver and very carefully kind of spread this out. Sometimes these slotted shafts get bent in a little bit, so you can see how you could get a flat blade. Be really careful not to break these though. You don't want to be doing that.
And there we go.
Remove the remaining 6 screws. And of course now is a good time to inspect for cracked solder joints. Some of these pots to me sometimes can feel a little loose, but it feels like that play is in the shaft. And it's crazy. These switches have a lot of connections here. So let's carefully lift the board away. Let me back you guys up here. Okay. And if I lift this panel up, okay, I can see that my connector is attached on the back. So we'll go ahead and remove 2 more screws and we'll release this connector. We'll be right back, guys. Okay, so we've released this connector from the back. So we will clean this panel over here. So now we're left with the board. And the programmer is pretty interesting. It talks over serial, and I believe it actually has 9 bits. Let me see another microprocessor here. Mitsubishi flavor. Looks like an 8048, so very similar family from what's on the Jx3p itself. I believe this also has another comparator on it. There should be. Let me take a look on the board here. There is another 311. So basically this is its own whole other microcomputer here with an A to D on it. So it basically samples all the analog values from the potentiometers and of course the states of the switches and the buttons, and multiplexes all of that, converts it to digital values, and then the microprocessor on here will communicate this information back towards the Jx3p over that MIDI connection, even though it is serial. So very kind of unique setup in a sense where they broke the analog circuitry outside of the synth, converted it digitally, and then communicated that back and from to the synth. So a unique setup here for sure. Roland did these on quite a number of synths. Also the D50, Jx3p, some of the Alpha Juno series. I know I'm missing a whole bunch, but Roland kind of did this thing where in the mid 80s and on, to make synths cheaper, of course, they removed a lot of the controls you would get, but at least they did offer optional programmers. And of course these are harder to come by than the synths nowadays, so It's nice when you can actually get your hands on one. And of course they make aftermarket programmers, but myself, being the nostalgic person I am, would prefer an original one. So what we're going to do now are pop these. These are actually just little silver caps that sit on top of these alps switches, and they actually still make these switches nowadays, which is nice. You can still get these parts from alps. But since the synth is working fine here and this programmer was doing alright, I'm just going to go ahead and clean everything. And then we will reinstall it into the synth. So again, just carefully pry up on these and keep some pressure down on the board so you don't flex the board. Sometimes they're a little more stubborn. I try not to use tools when I remove these, just because if you start prying and prodding at things, a lot of times you'll break something. You should never have to force anything if it doesn't want to go. And then of course the switches here are very easy. These caps just pull right off. Give them a nice gentle tug. And now I'm going to go give this a date with the air compressor. So I'm going to go blow this whole board over, get all the dust and stuff off of here. And then we're going to come back with your desoldering tool of choice, and we're going to remove these two switches because we have to soak them in order to properly clean them. So we'll be right back. Alright guys, so now we're going to do our thing here and remove these buttons. Okay, so these switches are down here. I'm gonna do a little rotation. Okay, so they're over here now, and the way they work, or the switch itself is soldered, and also the LED is soldered. So I'm gonna take a seat here, and we're gonna get these removed. So they are clipped together. It's just easy to unsolder both and then remove the switch as a whole. Then we can kind of go from there. So let's see. I'm going to try something new today. I'm going to try not adding solder. I always do. Well, let's see. Yeah, see, that's not going to work. Let's get some fresh solder on there. So I'm going to come back and reflow all these. Alright, now we're going to add some fresh solder first, as always. Okay, now we're just going to work these out. And now we're going to remove them. Just be careful because this PG200 board is actually dual-sided, unlike the panel board of the regular Jx3p. Therefore, there are two layers of traces here, and it looks like we don't have any vias on the top, but you would want to be very careful on reworking anything else on this board, just because you don't want to lift any. But I don't see any here, so we're good. So next thing we want to do is, you have this switch assembly, so you can just use your fingernails, and the switch, there's two clips here actually holding the tactile switch to the LED assembly. So I like to just hold one side, kind of open it up here, as we can see. And you just pry the tab back very carefully on both sides, and see how the switch comes forward. Now at the bottom there's like a little latching area for that, the white plastic. You don't want to break this off, so that's why you want to pull the switch forward, get it released from the clips, and then lift it away like that. And you can see at the very bottom of the switch there's a little tang on the front here, and that's what goes inside of that little white area. So you want to separate the two switches. Okay, again, gonna focus here, there we go. So grab the back, get one fingernail on each side, release with your thumb, push the top of the switch forward. Usually I do this down on the bench. Okay, then it comes forward like that. You can just lift away. So we're gonna get the redneck parts washer here, and we're gonna actually soak these switches for a few days in the isopropyl. And I like to throw the LEDs in just for a few minutes to just get all the crap out of here. It's really just an LED inside of a white housing. You can actually pull another tab right here and release the LED. It's just a 2mm box LED, so you could upgrade these if you wanted to. But I'm just gonna pour these in. All right, flow the waters here just a little. Make sure I catch you guys on camera. Oh, look at that, I got a free present. Yeah, you can see I've lost a few things inside of this container. So if you buy from this brand, they'll give you some free swabs. There we go. This has been in here for about a year. So I'm gonna use this to clean the board. Don't let anything go to waste, guys. Real quick, I just did the LEDs in there. I already pulled them out. Just literally do the LEDs for like 30 seconds. I'm gonna use the sealed glass jar that I got here. It's actually a made in Italy jar. Very, very fancy. And if I can't back you guys up here, there we go. I'm gonna go ahead and hermetically seal, that way it doesn't evaporate. And I just like to come by, give these a little shake, and then we're just gonna put them up and let them sit for a few days. So, yep. Alright guys, so next we're gonna clean out these switches just as preventative maintenance. So, stuff I like to use that's actually safe for switches and doesn't leave any residue behind is this deoxit fader F5. So the F100 is mostly solvent, basically. The F5 is only 5% cleaner and the rest is solvent. So this is going to flush the stuff out of the switches. So I'm going to flip them all in one direction first and come through and just give each one a blast. I'll go in here. Okay, and then I like to exercise the switch multiple times. And this formula, like I said, is good for the metal contacts on the switch, just because you don't really need any lubrication or want any lubrication in these, whereas the pots, it's a little bit different. Now you have to be careful with what potentiometers you use. I always see all these videos where the guys freak out with deoxit, right? They use something like this or this. Alright, this D100 stuff right here, which is, again, more for preserving, removing corrosion, also preserving connectors. So you could use something like this in a switch as well. Some guys freak out with the potentiometers, saying that it's no good and it's going to eat away at the carbon. And then we have this D5, okay? So again, this is like the equivalent of the F5. This is more so of a solvent than an actual lubricant. So something like this would be good for flushing stuff out of pots. Now, I'd be really careful. So with like rotary encoders and things, I would clean them with this F5. But if you put these into like a regular potentiometer, like the Profit 5, and you blow all that stuff out, or even worse, if you actually use this F5 on a slider, like on a Jx3p slider, or any other sort of slider, Juno 60 for example, you'll actually flush what little grease they put in there to lubricate the shafts, like I showed you in the last video. And if you flush all that stuff out, it's going to make the slider feel really gritty, and it'll bind and not feel good. and you'll wash all that lubricant out and you'll be left with a really crappy feeling slider. So definitely don't use any of these lower, more solvent based cleaners on potentiometers. Just be careful with what you're doing there. But for switches, this stuff works great. So I'm going to work my way through. When I'm done, I'm going to come flush the other side, top down. And then I'm going to come back when I'm done with some IPA on a good swab like this and go and clean up all the mess I left on the board. So just a quick update on these caps here. So guys, what I do is I put them in the old redneck parts washer. And I basically fill it up with Simple Green. And now I get the concentrate stuff, so it's not diluted with any water. It's very strong. So I do a layer, you know, I don't have to be super scientific. I do like a good layer of Simple Green, depending on how greasy this stuff is, and then like really, really hot water. And you shake it up, agitate it, let it sit for like 5 minutes, and then, 5 minutes, maybe like 15, 20 minutes, and really let that stuff soak. And I agitate it again, and if you take them out, they're actually perfect. But what I like to do, just to be extra thorough, is I'll dunk this magic eraser into the Simple Green solution. And you have to be careful because these on their own are pretty abrasive and they can remove paint. But I make sure this is super saturated, and I just very, very lightly rub each potentiometer down. And then I blow them out with the air compressor, and I just dry them with a good quality microfiber towel, and they come out literally like brand new. You can see over here. I mean, they look wonderful. So that's just how I do that. Alright, so now it's been a little bit of time here. It's been about 2 days. And we're going to extract our switches. Very carefully, we'll go in here, grab it by the leg. There's one. Of course, we're gonna have to wrestle a little. So what we're going to do is exercise the switch a bunch of times. Do the next one. So you can just place them upside down on a hard surface and go to town, rat-a-tat-tat. Okay. Then I like to dry them off with a clean microfiber towel. And we're going to let these dry at least for a few hours now. Sometimes it takes up to a day. It is still pretty warm here and not a lot of humidity in the air. So I'm going to let these guys dry and we'll be back. So now that they had time to dry, we're going to go ahead and reassemble our switch unit here. So we're going to take our LED, and again, you want to look at the bottom if you don't remember. And there's a little plastic notch there. Okay. And that is going to be towards the outside of the switch. So what you want to do is first you gotta align the white piece at the bottom, so kind of in reverse order. And then when you push the switch towards the LED very carefully, okay, it'll snap back in, and you want this black notch to be towards the outside here. So the easiest way to tell is you want the black switch facing away from the LED, not the silver side here, or the metal side. So you just want to make sure that this clipped in. There's two notches here where the white plastic actually goes into the black housing on either side. And if you flip it over, that little black tab should be at the top of this square hole here. And you want to make sure that this is pushed down. Okay, so that's how we assemble. Gonna do one more. So again, black side out. Start off by going in like that. So see, I'm gonna go in and don't put any pressure on the LED. You don't want to bend the LED. And good. Snaps right into place. We're looking aligned at the bottom here. Perfect. So there we go. Now we can go ahead and place these back into the board. So we're going to go ahead and place these in the board. The LED will go to the top. And these outer tabs are sort of spring loaded. I'm going to pop a squat here, guys. So you should just be able to walk them back in. Okay, there we go. And they'll actually snap into the board. And they usually hold pretty good tension. So if they're loose, you can actually bend those outer legs of the switch in place. But as you can see, even without soldering, these are nice and tight. So they're nicely aligned in place. And we're going to go ahead and flip the board over and solder. Got these soldered in. Gonna remove the flux here. Okay, and the last step here is we're going to take this deoxit fader F5, okay, mostly solvent. I like this on the tactile switches. And you're very, very carefully just going to dribble a tiny amount through the stem here. And this is just going to coat the inside of the switch and will help coat the contacts and protect them. So after you do this, we're going to exercise the switch a bunch of times. Okay, and we'll do the next one. Now on the whole Jx3p, this takes quite a while. Luckily we only have 2 switches on the programmer. So again, just dribble it down through the shaft of the button. And then you can come through with a clean swab and just kind of clean it up. The rest of it will evaporate since it's mostly solvent. Usually it doesn't make any mess. I'm pretty good at just putting in just enough to kind of go down the shaft of the stem. And after you get the buttons installed, you want to put these slide switch caps back on. Don't forget, because if you put it all together, you gotta take it all apart again. Okay, let's back this guy off. And now we're gonna grab our board like so. And just because sometimes this matting can leave like sort of an impression, I'm going to put a microfiber towel down. Just because I just wiped it really clean. So we'll lay that down. Okay. Now we want to line up everything here. And I want to make sure that the wires around this jack go around a post on the side here. Okay, so now this will pull up. So what we're going to do is very gently and carefully, we're going to pick up the programmer on one side. Okay, we're just going to kind of tack it in. So I'm going to do 2 opposing corners here. Just loosely screw them in. Just seat the screw. That's what I mean by loose. Okay, just started to seat. And we'll do the same over here. And this will allow the board to mount now. Now all the weight of this is going to be on the potentiometer shafts. And the shafts don't actually have nuts that hold them to the frame, okay? So you don't want to push down really, really hard on this. So what I'm going to do is just seat all of the screws. Just turn them in just till they bottom out and stop, and don't put tension. Because if I go too light and turn hard, I can strip the screw out as well. So we're going to get these in. Okay. One more. Now what I want to do is I'm going to pick up the corner here. And now I can start tightening these down. So I'll go in a crisscross pattern here. Just cause. Prevent the board from flexing. You don't have to go crazy, but you definitely want it snug. Okay. So now that that's good, I already went ahead and cleaned this, guys. So this is the outer panel, and this rubber was actually nasty. And you can see on this microfiber cloth here also, I gave it a good soaking on that magic eraser, and you can just see all the red and black and brown grime that came off the rubber. It looks like brand new. So now we're going to drop the top cover down, and where I can see the Roland logo, doesn't really matter, but that's where the serial number was before, so we'll keep it that way. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to seat this down on the 4 corners, and I'll explain why in a second, or just 2 opposing corners. Okay, and because this rubber piece actually has a groove, okay, and we want to make sure that this groove is seated with the lip of the programmer. So before, when I got this, the rubber was actually pushed into the programmer on one side, and you couldn't fix it without taking it apart. It looked terrible. So I could see the rubber looks great here. So we're going to flip the programmer back over. We're going to put in the rest of the screws. And here's a little trick. These are self-tapping sheet metal screws. So sometimes if they go in and they feel tight, stop, because you're going to like cross thread the hole that it kind of tapped for itself. So if you actually spin backwards, you'll hear the click. Basically, when you get to the end of the screw and the threads run out, it'll bounce up and reseat itself. And a lot of times, that'll actually align the screw perfectly with the hole. So I don't always do that. You know, sometimes you can just wiggle around and you feel the screw go in. But if you ever feel resistance like that, like it's starting to cross thread, don't force it. Give that method a shot and see if you have luck. So again, I don't want to put weight on the pots, so I'm going to pick up on each corner. I don't care too much about crisscrossing now because it's just a bottom panel. And we're going to tighten each of these screws. Like so. Okay. Now, get this out of here. Drop the screwdriver. Here we go. So here's the PG200. I'm going to turn all of the pots to the left. and I won't put you guys through here. But put everything to the left. I had it before, but they got moved around. And basically, I'm just gonna go in, show you on the LFO. Go top down, line that notch up with 0, and just carefully press that cap back on. And rinse and repeat for all of these. Now for these switches here, you're gonna try to line it up as best you can to the little dot. Okay, so that's like sine wave. If I turn it, yep, square, random. Because remember, these are not keyed knobs, so they're a star pattern. You can spin them any way you want, so you gotta line them up. And if any are loose, like I said, you can take your flat blade screwdriver, okay, carefully go in and just kind of push down and spread it apart. But again, there's no nut on here. Because these are such tiny knob caps, they didn't use a nut to secure the top of the pot to the panel. So when you press down on these, okay, they will move and they will stress those solder joints. And these larger knobs do have quite a few pins, and also sometimes they have anchoring pins, so they're thick pins that they use as grounds and they hold it to the board. That way the actual pins that pass the signal don't get stressed. And they still feel that way, and you can tell some of these, they're not loose, but they do have a little bit of up and down play, and that's to be expected, unfortunately, with this design. And it looks like you don't even have enough room if you wanted to add a tiny nut. You don't. The pots are not close enough to the top. You could on these bigger ones, but not on these small ones, and the bigger ones are actually much more firm. So, and it's just one of the nuances of the PG200. And thanks for tuning in, guys. It was fun doing this with you, and y'all have a great day.